All right, I believe that we are live. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Today we have a very interesting look at history. We often get this claim from atheists that all of violence is related to religion. And of course, when they say that in the West, religion and Christianity are synonyms. So they make this accusation basically that Christianity is responsible for all the violence in world history, maybe some other religions a long time ago, but recent violence, that's Christianity. If we could all just be atheists, then we can all live together in peace from now on. However, when we actually look at the history, which we're going to do today, we're going to see that even though atheism as a significant movement is only a couple hundred years old, it has a substantial history from violence, and not just the things that you might think of, like the communist regimes that atheists will, of course, disavow, but in fact, the very foundational thinkers of Islam, or I'm sorry, atheism, the very foundational thinkers of atheism were all about violence, that they said and attempted to practice the elimination of Christianity through violence. Before I introduce my guests, let me open us in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time together. We thank you for the technology that allows us to connect with people from all around the world. People who are Christians and people who are not Christians. We ask that everyone listening today, whatever their religious beliefs or lack of religious beliefs may be, that they approach the material with an open mind, that they not simply take their preconceived notions into things, but rather look at the historical facts that we're presenting and ask themselves questions, ask themselves what this means for their particular worldview, whatever that may be. We ask that you be with us today, that you guide our discussion, and you prevent us from theological error. We ask that whatever we say that is true and useful is remembered and applied, and whatever we say that is in error is simply forgotten. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, I'm going to give my guests, they've both been on this channel before, so we'll just do very brief introductions, but I'll give my guests a chance to say a couple words about today's topic, about themselves, whatever they want to talk about, starting with Thunderous One. Welcome back to the channel.
Hi, Mr. T. Hi, Lloyd. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on this channel again, to enjoy your company and to have this discussion. Hopefully, we're going to really dig deep into the material. This is a particular so even though I've come from a Muslim background and I enjoy talking about Islam, this is a real pet hate of mine, particularly this day and age, because with Islam, it doesn't affect much of the worldview as far as a Christian is concerned. They just have to live with it and they're not part of it. Whereas atheism and the associated sciences has infected the Christian worldview, and those will be some of the things I'll be bringing up today.
Excellent. Lloyd, this presentation is your new brainchild. You want to tell us a little bit about what motivated you to do this?
Yeah, hey everyone. This is probably my 497th appearance on Thaddeus's channel. Yeah, thanks for having me back. So I was never very much into atheism as a subject. However, I've done extensive work on Islam, and I felt kind of that I wouldn't say it's finished or I've done everything that could possibly be done, but I think I've done extensive work. And then I did some work on another channel with a very intelligent young woman, very capable, very intelligent, very hardworking, and so on. However, at one point she had a guest on who was spouting the worst, most dishonest babble. And when I commented on the channel, it seemed to genuinely offend the people in the chat. And when I asked for evidence and I provided evidence, they A, just rejected evidence out of hand, and B, they dogpiled and refused to provide evidence. There were claims, assertions, all sorts of things were said that they refused to back up and verify. And when I was able to, at least I believe, provide credible historical detail and fact, they rejected all of that out of hand. And I realized this was no different to basic Abdulism. This is absolutely no different to the standard Islamic tactic. And this upset me. So I took some time out, did some research. I've been collecting data for 2 years, and I started to put it together. And then I started to realize that atheism is a very, very well organized force. Atheism really falls under the rubric of, shall we say, secular humanism. Secular humanism is a religion, or shall we say it is a pseudo-religion. It is a counterfeit religion. It is literally a copy-paste of effectively the Roman Catholic Church or the Protestant Church, depending on the strand that you're looking at. And secular humanism really falls under socialism. Socialism was started in the history goes way back, but we're looking at the more modern roots, so we're going to go back to roughly the time of the Enlightenment / French Revolution. Socialism was started as a religion, specifically a religion, basically Christianity minus any sort of deity, Christianity without Jesus, Christianity without God. And it was originally called Christian socialism. So all of the socialists that followed are really promoting a religion that has no deity. They're utilizing the structure of Christianity because they realize that there needs to be some kind of force around which people can adhere socially, some kind of force to provide meaning for people. So yeah, anyway, so I've got into the history. The history of atheism is nothing short of genocidal. It is irrational, and it is very, very dark and dirty. And atheists keep saying, well, Christianity cannot be true. I cannot follow it because of its violence. Well, we're going to see that atheism is significantly, in fact, in the 20th century alone, atheist regimes, atheist governments, that was the most violent. The 20th century was the most violent century in history. The atheist governments killed more people than all religions on earth combined over the previous 1900 years. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
We have a comment here from He Never Returned as a Horse. Let me thank you, Lloyd. I was able to use your scholarship to refute a few secular claims last Saturday evening during a large group discussion. And that is great to hear. That is why we do this. I'm happy if people are entertained and they have fun, but ultimately this is about truth. This is about taking the information and using it and having conversations with people and moving the narrative forward, not just, sitting back and being entertained. So that is awesome to hear.
Yeah, can I just add on that as well, Mr. T?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think hopefully there'll be some fun with the conversation that we're going to have tonight. But there's a dark seriousness as well, because when one considers the social infrastructure of the world and the way it is at the moment between America, England, Europe, and Australia, the English-speaking languages, we're seeing an image being developed, has been incrementally for the past few years, that is truly beyond Sodom and Gomorrah, that is developing. And this influence, which is predicated in the image of atheism and evolution, there is no other way of finding or reasoning any other way. And this lifestyle course for many, and this influence is certainly affecting the minds of many who claim to be following the biblical narrative. So hopefully there'll be a lot more information, not just the history, but the lines of reasoning that we can use in the discussion tonight to counteract the impact of atheism on the things that we believe and know to be true.
And we also have a comment from Islam Mentira or Verda. But in my country, atheists say they are peaceful. But we can watch how peaceful and loving are the FARC. And we're going to see, as we go through this, quite a number of interesting parallels between atheism and Islam. I think, people watching this are probably pretty familiar with Islam, things like, in this case, Muslims saying, oh, we're peaceful when you're in the minority. But as soon as you get power, that peacefulness disappears.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to start with the presentation, Lloyd?
Yeah, I guess I can. So I am unfamiliar with your new interface. I would need to share. How does I do that?
So you want to
Okay, there I see. Okay, I
Yeah,
just moved
okay.
something out the way. I click on this button. Oh, I do. Okay, I click on that button, then I click on this button. Awesome. I am now. You should be seeing my screen now. It looks like it.
Yeah, I got to add it to the scene, I believe. Where's that button? Yes, there it is. All right, it is on the screen now. We are getting a tiny bit of feedback from you, Thunderous, so if you want to mute yourself while you're not talking, that'd be great.
Yeah, much better. All right. Yeah, so your new interface is a
little different than you're used to.
Yeah, and it's got overlap, and it's a bit awkward because it's covering the screen. And okay, so this is called Murder in the Name of Reason, when atheists persecuted Christians. So we will go through the history of a genocide of Christians in the name of reason by atheists for the purposes of de-Christianizing their country. So these are atheists acting. Now, this is not to say they shouted, in the name of atheism, we murder you. No. And when people say in the name of God, that doesn't mean that we're shouting we do this. No, it's in the name of that belief system. So atheists are responsible for the worst genocides of the last 2,000 years. So this is about atheists, socialists, and the cult of reason. And you will find that atheism and socialism are very tightly bound. The two go very, very strongly together. And we will also learn as we go through the series that if I had to put random atheist comments from Richard Dawkins, random atheist 42 in the comments, and from Sam Harris and Stalin, Lenin, Mao. Now, Hitler was not an atheist, but he also had some very anti-Christian things to say. If I put Pol Pot, Mao, Lenin, Stalin, all of these people, and I put random atheist comments in a list without names, you would be very hard-pressed to tell the difference. In fact, they're identical. They are parroting the same statements, the same comments as the worst genocidal atheist leaders in history. So let's start. So socialism and atheism. Now, socialism is a political religion, very much like Islam, and atheism is intricately linked. It is intertwined with socialism, and socialism was created to be a religion, specifically a counterfeit Christianity. Secular humanism is atheist socialist religious doctrine. Now, atheism is religious. It is an integral part of socialism and humanism. The history of humanism itself is very, very interesting. I've actually studied it in depth. I've got some really interesting details, and we'll do that in the future. And you will see simply how atheism is not a neutral position. I know that most atheists will immediately protest, no, it's neutral. No, it is specifically anti-Christian. It is anti-clerical. It is anti-church. So it is an active proselytizing ideology. Atheism and humanism are religions as per the US Supreme Court, and they fought in court to have their atheism recognized as a valid religious ideology. Atheism and secular humanism were born in blood and violence. Atheist humanism and socialism was founded and promoted by people who are objectively bat poop crazy utopian totalitarians. And atheism/humanism, because they're very much integrated with each other, and with socialism, are political proselytizing religions like Islam. Atheism, if it were, for argument's sake, just a lack of belief, right, then what do they believe? What does that enable? And inevitably, you're going to find that this is deeply connected to secular humanism. And secular humanism is a proselytizing political religion. Right, and atheism and humanism in government has always been dysfunctional and genocidal. So those are my opening statements. Any thoughts from you guys?
So I'll go first here. We have a comment from Slade X15, random atheist 15 apparently. Actually, that's not fair. I don't know for sure he's an atheist. How is atheism a religion? And I think that you should definitely stay tuned and find out. But in practice, atheists are never just atheists, right? An atheist is never just someone who has a lack of belief in God. Indeed, if we point out that atheism doesn't have any moral values, the atheist will typically get quite upset and be like, I have moral values just like you. Yeah, that's because you're a secular humanist, which is what almost all atheists are. And secular humanism is a set of, if you don't want to call them religious, fine, a set of philosophical beliefs that are accepted without any proof. Things that are unprovable, like what is the correct moral position to have, for example. And the courts have declared the same. They've looked at it and they said, yep, humanism acts just like a religion. It should have the same legal protections as a religion. And all the early humanist societies argued the exact same thing. In fact, they said explicitly many times, we are creating a new religion to replace the old religion.
Yeah, no, secular humanism was started specifically as a religion, as was socialism.
Can I just add on to that as well?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I think also as well, when you consider atheism as it is today, when you say that, how is it a religion? If I was to ask you, then what's your stand on evolution? By defense or promotion, you're going to say evolution is true. So that's where you put your faith. You put your faith in a scientific process that allegedly has taken place in the past. So you believe in science. You believe in things even that creationists don't believe. For instance, you believe in magic. The universe came from nothing. You believe in miracles. Life came from non-life. You believe in mysteries because apparently two cows or two bears went into the sea and became whales, both male and female simultaneously. You believe that lizards became birds, and you believe squirrels ultimately became you. That is religion.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay, so let's continue now. Rice, we're not here to talk about Islam at any length today, so listen up and learn something. Okay, so this is one of my subscribers who mentioned this, and these are some very interesting points that are worth raising. So, atheists substitute themselves in God's place. In fact, many atheists will claim to be God or to be a God. Atheism is second-hand religion. Its beliefs are derived from theism, with, of course, their own particular perspective. Now, it merely negates theism, and you cannot be a derivative of something yet claim no association with it. So it is really a position. Now, understand, if atheism claims it has no beliefs, that's fine. That is a psychological condition, right? To not have a particular thing in your head at that point is a psychological state. However, if you have an argument for or against a position, then you have an ideology. That is not a lack of belief. That is and of course, atheists are happy to, like vegans, they're happy to tell you all about why you have to believe something else. They are very happy to tell you what to believe and how your beliefs are wrong. And they don't have any beliefs, but they'll speak all day about how your beliefs are wrong and about how their beliefs that they don't have are correct. So now atheists claim this lack of belief using the passive voice, and the active voice for lack of belief is, quite bluntly, and we will see this as we go through their very specific statements, that there's belief that there's no God or gods. It's a rejection. It's an active rejection of the Christian worldview. And atheism is built on a grammar trick, because Christianity is a lack of belief. There you go. Now, Dawkins, of course, tried to change the name from atheist to brights, which, what is that, Illuminati? And yeah. And also, what is interesting is that because they have this concept of mechanical determinism, right? That our thoughts are determinist, that they're simply atoms that are smashing together that are mechanical. It's very interesting that the vast majority of people in the world are religious, that therefore we have so many religious atoms. And if you have no control over what your atoms are causing you to think, right, then how can they claim that you are wrong? Because this seems to be the natural outcome within nature. But anyway, so yeah, there's plenty of incoherence. So I'll start off with this. So any comment before I go on, guys?
Yeah, just on the first point you raised, if we can just go back to the slide. If you can. The fourth point raised there, atheists substitute themselves in God's place. And this might be something interesting for people who believe the biblical narrative. All they've got to do is go to Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. And that was exactly the argument that Satan raised with Adam and Eve. God, your free will is expressed by you not eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Therefore, by implication, you're letting God determine what's right and wrong for you. Whereas if you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, you therefore becomes gods to yourself. So you can determine for yourself what is right and what is wrong. And that's exactly what the atheists are trying to do. They're replacing God, not just figuratively, but literally. And that follows along as well with scriptures like Jeremiah 10:23.
Interesting. So,
just a quick housekeeping note here. I have put Rice in timeout. Today we're talking about atheism. If you want to talk about Islam, feel free to come to any of my many streams about Islam. It's very interesting how often atheists come to a stream about Islam and try to bash Christianity. And how often Muslims come to a stream about atheism and try to bash Christianity. Almost like they're two systems that are fundamentally anti-Christian above all else.
Yeah, they joined at the hip. That is true. They have the same names. Okay, so wait, you just mentioned something. So I'm just gonna dwell for a minute off topic. I want to raise something here. So before I get to the other introduction, this is the opening statement for Humanist Canada. This is the secular humanist organization for Canada. Humanism is a philosophy or life stance based upon a profound... Thaddeus, you think this is a good idea? Just to introduce this fine. And show that connection. It's a philosophy or life stance based upon a profound respect for human dignity and that we're all ultimately accountable to ourselves and to society for our actions. Our worldview is deity-free and affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical and meaningful lives without reliance upon a belief in the supernatural. As humanists, we believe that reason and science are the best ways to understand the world. Dignity and compassion should be the basis for how we act towards others. We want to all live in a fair and equal society through our ceremonies, religious ceremonies, our services, religious services, affiliate groups and partnerships. We bring humanism through proselytizing to communities across the country, while also raising awareness on the national stage. They have political aims. So let's have a look. So that's all wonderful sounding. Let's go here. Let's look at these 7 fundamental tenets of an organization that does not believe in God or believe in the Christian worldview. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures, which is fantastic, right? So we should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. So justice, the Sharia, must prevail over man's laws, right? The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world, and we should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. And of course, people are fallible, that's great, and every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the spoken word. So I'll take a moment, guys. Can someone please tell me, right, which organization wrote these words?
Well, I won't answer because I know the answer already, but I would be very interested to see what the chat thinks about this particular set
And
up.
don't understand, this is exactly the same language. You will find identical language amongst, you'll see Marx do it, you'll see Lenin, Stalin, you'll see the communists say the same things, and you will also see all the secular humanist organizations say the same thing. This is word for word what they all say. So maybe Arnold's seen this before. It's very possible. So let me go here to the temple, to the Satanic Temple. So let's have a look and see what the Satanic Temple has to show us. And there are seven fundamental tenets, and this is the Satanic Temple. So welcome to the Temple of Satan. These are their 7 fundamental tenets.
Can I just comment on your list of their tenets?
Yeah.
If you look at the first one, it says everyone should strive to act with compassion and empathy, but they're not determining what the compassion and empathy is to all creatures. Because if your world view is predicated on materialism, then compassion and empathy can't be determined by sheer material outlook, because there's nothing beyond the material. So they have to define what the words mean as far as compassion and empathy are concerned, but they don't define what the words mean. And if you go further down on the list, it says there on point 5, I can just spend an hour on this alone, but I just want to go to point 5. It says that belief should conform to one's best belief should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care to not distort scientific facts for one's beliefs. The very outview, the very outlook, the mere material outlook is predicated all from the beginning to the end on a lie. There is no truth in atheism, and there is no truth in evolution. So point 5 is a total contradiction of what their outlook is in the first place.
So anyhow, so on that point, so now we can see that the atheist secular humanist worldview is in total conformity with the Temple of Satan. So you can look at these statements and you will find that they don't differ from each other. They don't differ. They are very much the same worldview. So from a Christian point of view, secular humanism, which is very tightly tied to both socialism and to atheism, is satanic, quite literally satanic. So Wesley Curry is, let's just say he's not capable of sticking to the topic, and seems to be.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So guys.
Yeah, as I say, no worry. I give him a warning, and then the next time he goes off topic, I will time him out.
Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look. So we start with this. Is this satire? Guys, if you can guess, tell me what year this is from. Some of you will have seen it, of course. So for those who have not, try and guess what year this is from. This is a play called The Congresswomen. And this is someone who's written this play for an audience to ridicule, to make fun of the attitudes that were prevalent, okay, at that time. These are the attitudes, these are the things people were saying. And so, yeah. So the women of the city, wearing beards and dressed in men's clothing, came to the assembly and by a majority vote passed a resolution transferring all power in the state to women. They used this power to introduce a series of measures which are expounded in a dialogue between the leader of the women and her husband. Here are several quotations. We want compulsory community property, compulsory universal community property, right? Which is entirely socialist, right? It's the communist thing. Abolition of private property is what I propose. Across the board, economic equality to fill those fissures that scar our society's face. No more division between rich and poor. You will discover that the socialists have exactly the same aims. We'll wear the same clothes, we will share the same food, and we'll come across that too. My initial move will be to communalize land and money and all other property. But take the landless man who's invisibly wealthy. He hides his silver and gold in his pockets. What about him? He will deposit all of his money in the fund. In other words, we will take all of his money. I'll knock out walls and remodel the city into a big, happy household where all can come and go as they choose. I'm pooling the women, creating a public hoard for the use of every man who wishes to take them to bed and make babies. A system like this requires a pretty wise father to know his own children. But why does he need to? Age is the new criterion. Children will henceforth trace their descent from all men who might have begot them. So destruction of the nuclear family, which is one of the tenets of communism. Who's going to work the land and produce the food? Well, the slaves. This leaves you just one civic function. When the shades of night draw on, slip meekly down to dinner. And we will see Marx says very much the same things. The state is not going to stint. It's not going to be, it's not going to hold back. Its hand is full and open, its heart is large. It'll stuff its menfolk free of charge, then issue them torches when dinner's done and send them out to hunt for fun. So, yeah, when was this written? Who can guess? And this should sound very familiar. It sounds like what we call, well, the Democratic Party today.
Yeah, of course, I've seen this before, and maybe some of the audience have seen your earlier version of this presentation as well. But the first time I saw this, I thought for sure that this was written by some figure in the early history of socialism. I thought for sure that it would be Marx or one of his friends. And of course, that is not actually when it comes from. It does sound a lot like today as well. But I figured, Lloyd's presenting this because he's saying that the early roots of socialism is what we see now.
Yeah, so it does sound like the 1930s. He never returned his horse. So this was written by Aristophanes in 392 BC. So this was written more than 2,400 years ago. So these ideas, these socialist ideas, have been around, and these were pagan ideas. So do understand that the whole enterprise, the entire enterprise, which we now know as 392 BC XYZ, more than 2,400 years ago. So the entire enterprise that secular humanism is pushing for is basically pagan Greek and Roman culture. So they are pushing pagan Greek and Roman culture. Right? So let's continue. So these ideas are not new. These are very, very old ideas. They've been recycled and they failed, and they've been recycled and they failed, and they've been recycled. It's a history of failure. So Carl Sagan. Now, atheists like to continually mention Carl Sagan that says all that exists is matter. It's all that was, all that is, and all that ever will be. Well, he also happens to say the following. An atheist is someone who is certain that God does not exist, someone who has compelling evidence against the existence of God. I know of no such compelling evidence. So, Carl Sagan knows of no such compelling evidence. So Carl Sagan is obviously not a real Muslim, right? He's daif. Because God can be relegated to remote times and places and to ultimate causes, we would have to know a great deal more about the universe than we do know to be sure that no such God exists. So, your thoughts, guys?
For me, straight away, the first thing that comes up, because Carl Sagan is a renowned scientist, this is at best, or a good example of academic gatekeeping, where the system that we're living in at the moment hides behind academic achievement or academic position, where somebody like Carl Sagan will speak with authority and therefore serves as the gatekeeper to information, in as much that unless you're at the same stature of Carl Sagan or above, and you have a voice that can be heard, which in this system of things we find very rare now, because every time you go to the school system, the education system, whether it's at primary school now all the way through to university, and when you're looking at mainstream media and entertainment and scientific magazines, they're all promoting the same narrative, which is evolution. So it hides behind the scientific achievement of scientists. So therefore the layman can't challenge, because who are you? You're just a layman. You're not a scientist. You're not in a position to challenge these people who hide behind the sciences.
That's a very interesting comment from you there, Thunderous. This sounds a lot like Islam, does it not? That the lay Muslim has no authority to challenge what the scholars say. The lay secularist has no authority to challenge what the scientists say. Very interesting.
Well, this is why I said just before the show started that when you look at Islam and atheism evolution, it is exactly the same. The subject matter may different, but all the tenets, the rules of engagement, the role and the how they argue, that homonyms, the hiding behind science, the hiding behind academic gatekeeping, authoritative gatekeeping, and such. It's exactly the same. It's only the subject material that differs.
Well, when socialism was developed as an ideology, as a religion, its aim was to have scientists take the place of priests. Society would be run according to lines set by scientists.
Can I just bring out a point from the book, The Long War Against God, written by Dr. Henry Morris? It's actually taken on page 184. Now, I'm just going to quickly read through this. May I have the opportunity to do that?
Good.
Okay, so it reads here, in this section, however, we want to look briefly at the scientific atmosphere between the Renaissance and the period of Lamarck and Erasmus Darwin, when evolutionism came out into the open again. During the 18th century, there were a few cautious evolutionists among the scientists, but most competent scientists of the period were strong and convinced creationists. And the book goes on to name some people. Among the crypto-evolutionists, however, were Benoit de Maillet, 1656 to 1738. Pierre de, forgive me if I'm butchering the pronunciations here.
Skip the names.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So what he goes on to say is that if you look at atheism as a philosophy and science as a and evolution as a biology, they were running concurrent, if you like, both at the same time simultaneously, but they weren't joint together yet. It's only at a future point that they come together as one. It's very much like the Quran and Hadith. You can't have one without the other. If you're a true Muslim, you have to have the Quran and you have to have the Hadith. They work simultaneously and parasitically, symbiotically. In the same way with atheism today, the seeds of what we have as atheism today were sown in the past. But we have the philosophical point of atheism and we have the scientific point of evolution that both serve each other parasitically and symbiotically as it is today.
Okay, this is I'm going to go not off topic, but this is a thesis written by very well-known, well, he's actually a well-known author and lawyer, but this was his thesis written in 1965 on secular humanism, on the founding of secular humanism. It's very detailed. I've read the entire thing. It's 184 pages of data plus another 20 pages of references, and I read the entire thing. Secular humanists have sought to associate or identify their movement with science and the scientific method, and he goes on page after page after that. Attempted to make humanism the embodiment of science and the scientific method, striven to interchange science and humanism such that humanism becomes an extension of science, and observers left with the impression that science is symbolized through humanism. And in fact, in order to be scientific, one must first be a humanist. Scientific and humanistic are actually synonymous adjectives. He writes this as part of, I mean, he goes, man, there's like page after page of detail, dozens of pages discussing exactly that. So rhetorically, they have connected human morality with humanism, and moral behavior becomes, in fact, humanistic behavior. So therefore, they're trying to create an aura of respectability which surrounds science and morality. So therefore, this results in the false impression that only the humanists can be really considered scientific or moral. Anyone who's not a humanist is neither scientific nor moral. So this is what they have done. They've created this entire dogma. So the humanist, so basically, so anything that is not humanist is the enemy. So that is what they have created.
Only the term science.
We're not here to discuss this right now, Thunderous. That's going to go way off topic, and we're going to... And no, they do not provide a definition of science. They simply assert that they are scientific and leave the definition vague. As the thesis covers in detail, it says no, they don't provide any sort of working definition. It's an assertion, and the definitions are left very, very vague. They just claim to be scientific. Thaddeus, anything from you?
So Billy here says, like the Muslim with his Islamic dilemma, the atheist has his own dilemma. I'm very interested. I think they have multiple, so I'm very interested to see what you're thinking, yep. Billy. Let us know.
So let's look at the very first atheist state, right? Let's look at the very first atheist state based on reason, right? Coming out of the Enlightenment, so taking these Enlightenment principles to build the very first state built on reason, based on man, worshipping man as the ultimate being of creation, right? This was, of course, an attempt to de-Christianize a particular country, in this case, France, and we know it as the French Revolution, but it was really the de-Christianization of France by atheists. So now, September 2nd, 1792, at Camp's prison in Paris, over 100 Catholic priests were jailed within an old monastery. Their crime? Refusing to forsake their church for the new secular republic. A vicious mob stormed the prison and then slaughtered 115 priests. That bloodbath was just one of several remembered today as the September massacres, when over 1,000 victims perished. At the end of the day, they murdered over 250,000 people. They slaughtered priests on sight. Right? Now, this was the atheist purge. Now, these atrocities were part of an escalating campaign of violence that came to be known as de-Christianization, by which atheists sought to purge religion from France. Now, in just this one incident, they killed 115 priests. Now, of course, atheists are still talking about how 19 witches were killed in Salem. So now we've got 6 times that number in just one incident during the French Revolution, where atheists, specifically in the name of de-Christianization, to make secular republic in the name of reason, slaughtered thousands of people, thousands of priests, nuns, you name it. So, any comments from you guys before I go on?
When the word
go ahead.
I was going to say, when the word reason is used, how are they determining the word reason and how are they employing it?
Well, that is a fascinating question, isn't it? Reason means that you don't believe in God, because if you believe in God, you clearly are not someone with the faculty of reason. See, it's proof by definition. The definition proves itself. The definition defines itself, and that's really how it functions.
So what you're saying is, if I don't believe in God, I'm a reasonable person, and if I do believe in God, I'm an unreasonable person. That's the very definition.
Yes, you lack common sense. In fact, you are evil.
Well, that's very much because that's probably where Richard Dawkins gets his default comments from, because that's pretty much what he says as well.
Yeah, no, we'll get into that. Yeah, we'll see the roots of this. I mean, this will take hours to unpack over time, over the next few weeks and months. But the roots of all of those statements, and we'll see that Dawkins is quoting Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, you name it. He's quoting them. Yeah. Thaddeus?
Yeah, that's a very observant point there, that atheists define themselves as reasonable. You know, it's just a definition, but in the typical atheist takes this as a point of pride. They say that I'm better than the Christians because I'm smart, I'm an atheist, I'm reasonable. And often when you talk to these people, the level of arrogance is definitely quite high. The level of intelligence, meh. I mean, the average atheist is about average intelligence. It's not like you have to be particularly intelligent to become an atheist. In fact, I'm sure there are many people who are well below average in intelligence that are atheists, and many people who are well above average intelligence that are Christians. Yet, to the average atheist, everyone who is an atheist is very smart, and everyone who is not is very stupid. It's very, very interesting that they define themselves this way.
Dawkins, you would be evil.
Yeah, and then they tell us that that we're only Christians because of the benefit it provides us, while not realizing that they're atheists because it allows them to feel smart and also to define their own morals and be their own God.
Yeah. Yeah. So to continue with this, now there were atheists, of course, that argued that this was necessary. So these murders were necessary so that reason would triumph over superstition and fanaticism. So they were murdering tens of thousands of people so that reason would triumph over superstition and fanaticism. So they were not fanatics at all. And they were reasonably murdering people because of their superstitions. Right. So now, in their eyes, the churches were weeds in need of plowing so that more enlightened ideas could grow. Crosses were seized from altars. Bells were plundered and melted down. The calendar was changed from a 7-day week to a 10-day week, removing Sundays so that there would not be a time to worship. It should be noted in the Soviet Union, they did the very same thing. The secularists no longer wanted to base their dating system around the birth of Jesus, so they reset the count and based it upon the birth of their revolution. It should be noted that the Muslims also changed their calendar to start with the time that they started their hijrah, their immigration, which is the start of their Islamic revolution, if you will. So they have that in common. Green Eagles, no, absolutely no.
I would.
Are,
Sorry, go ahead, Lloyd.
no. So Green Eagles, we're here to talk about atheism, all right? And if you want to talk about Protestants, man, I'm happy. I'm a Protestant, but I am very happy to put on a show at some point, and I will make sure that you learn just how bloodthirsty, vicious, and violent Protestants are. Okay, so please do not. You owe a lot more to the Catholic Church than you realize.
I would say that the Christian position is that all human beings have this inclination to violence. All human beings have this inclination to make themselves God, and Christians are not exempt from that. When we're properly walking in God's will and we're properly understanding who we are, then we acknowledge that that doesn't make any sense, but that doesn't mean that we actually in practice do that all the time. And there have been incidents in Christian history of violence. There's been incidents of Catholic violence against Protestants and Protestant violence against Catholics. And in the Crusades, yes, it was organized against the Muslims, but a lot of the violence ended up being done against people in the Eastern Orthodox Church. That the Protestants and Catholics Catholics, not Protestants because they didn't exist yet. The Catholics coming from Europe, they attacked the Orthodox because, hey, they have stuff. We would like to take their stuff. So yeah, this is just a human problem. It's not a Catholic problem. It's not a Protestant problem. It's not a atheist problem. It's a human problem. But atheism does not provide any solution. Christianity does.
Thanks for that. Yeah, very good point. Yeah. So that would be a sin and a crime under Western law. And I have no idea what you're talking about. So, okay, let's ignore Green Eagles because he's probably here to vent his spleen about Catholics or something. Okay, so moving on. So now let's look at the worship of reason, the atheist religion, right? So the atheists formed a religion called the cult of reason. And notice this is very strong Greek and Roman imagery because they believed that they were the inheritors of the Greek and Roman tradition, right? So this is Lady Liberty, just so by the way. And yeah, she symbolized enlightened thinking. So let's continue. So the atheists then sought to replace Christianity with their own belief system called the cult of reason, right? Which was the very first state-sponsored atheistic religion. It was a godless alternative to churches where citizens could hear sermons that instilled virtue with no biblical language. Now, the churches were deconsecrated into temples of reason devoted to the worship of reason, personified as a woman bearing a torch. The atheists made up their own holiday, the Festival of Reason, held on 10th November 1793 at Notre Dame and other cathedrals. Notre Dame was the largest such celebration. Altars were rededicated to truth and liberty. The festival was not a dignified ceremony, but a spectacle, a Mardi Gras or Pride Parade. There are plenty of reports that speak of naked women, prostitutes, and so on, who were laid naked across the altars. So it seems that the first thing they did to celebrate reason was to get a bunch of naked women into the room to dance for them, which, yeah, seems to be. So notice how to define atheism. It's like Muslims asking you, how do you find what is Sharia? Like go away. So, yeah. And then Lady Liberty, which is liberty enlightening the world, replaced Virgin Mary on several altars to symbolize enlightened thinking. This was the enlightened thinking that murdered people for not converting to secularism. Anything from you, Thunderous, before I go on?
No, the thing that was coming through my mind and looking at the comments that are in the chat as well is that what for those that are bearing in mind the biblical narrative, that it's not just men at work here. There are other forces that have been around since the beginning of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden that have been working against God and working against the Bible. And what we're seeing here is little seeds being sown into history that are leading to a conclusion to where we are today. So there are other dimensions that we need to consider when looking at this material as well. There are other forces at play.
Right. But that is news from you before I...
Nope, nothing to add right now.
Yeah, I mean, so the whole today is we were planning to go a little slower paced, I think, was the whole thing, because apparently people said it was a huge data dump. Well, so Green Eagles asked a good question. Does atheistic thinking affect others to commit bloodshed, including those? Now, here's the thing. Christianity has the 10 Commandments coming from an absolute God, right? So you have this transcendent God. So you have a standard that says, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not lie, right? Who is the authority in atheism? If you are a God, who has authority over you? Where's your absolute standard that we can judge you against? Well, you have none. You have no transcendent absolute value to judge against. So therefore, there is nothing in atheism. So maybe there's nothing in atheism that says go murder people, but there's nothing in atheism preventing it either. So Thaddeus, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is directly related to the question of, how do you define atheism? You just define he came in late, so he didn't see where we covered this earlier. But to rehash, if atheism is just the lack of belief, that's just a state of mind. That's not really a position. In practice, atheists almost always are secular humanists. That is, that they have a set of moral beliefs that they follow, a set of moral principles, and thus they end up acting a lot like, Christianity minus God, basically. Would that be a fair summary, Lloyd?
Yeah, I agree fully. And we will see that they claim that they will derive ethics and morals from science, and we will see exactly what these scientists are saying about ethics and morals, which goes against all these wonderful, lofty claims they make. And we see just how satanic they end up. Yeah.
So to answer the question on the screen, no, atheism doesn't by itself cause people to commit bloodshed, but it removes the inhibition against the natural inclination to be violent. It's a natural human inclination to be violent. I would argue that religion curbs that incompletely. And when you remove religion, then there's nothing left to curb your natural inclination to violence. So thus, while atheism doesn't directly cause bloodshed, it increases the probability of violence.
Yeah, it also dehumanizes man. There's nothing about the innate dignity of man. We're not made in the image of God. You're just atoms. And in fact, if there's no hell, there's no consequences. If there's no God, there's no consequences. So therefore, what you do has literally zero consequences. Therefore, there's nothing to stop you.
Yeah, can I just add 2 points? One being that this constant comparison of atheism and Christianity and war, but Christians don't define Christianity. It's the Bible that defines Christianity. We go to 2 Timothy 3:16, for example, or 1 Corinthians 4:6. So if you're seeing behavior that, for instance, the constant wars, you've only got to look at the Bible to see that those wars contradict the Bible, so therefore that can't be Christian. And when you look at atheism and their moral outlook, what they don't seem to be recognizing is that they're actually manifesting Christian traits or biblical traits and godly traits within them, because they're made in the image of God. You've only got to look at something like Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, where God says, let us make man in our image, so therefore we're imbued with qualities of God. Ecclesiastes, I think it's chapter 3 verse 9 or somewhere around there, and certainly in the book of Romans, where the apostle Paul himself says, I think in chapter 2, where it says, wherever man goes, he takes the law with him, because it's written on their heart. So we're imbued with qualities that are actually godly. The problem that the atheist has is those qualities are actually in line with biblical thinking and the image of what God wants us to be. So they're trying to shed that image that is in line with the Bible. and try and reinvent that in their own image. But the cognitive dissonance is not allowing them to do that.
Yeah. So, okay. Now understand this was reason they claim that is based on the Enlightenment. Now, the cult of reason was based on these principles and also on anti-clericalism. In other words, they are anti-priests, right? Yeah, it's amazing, Thunderous and Thaddeus, how these Muslims are coming out in favor of atheism. Maybe they're both, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
I think we've had 3 Muslims in the chat so far. All of them were saying that we should get rid of Christianity and replace it with atheism in various ways. Very interesting.
Yeah, very fascinating. So it's amazing. Muslims defending atheism. Of course, atheists will be murdered by the Muslims because atheism is a crime in Islamic law. So now, the goal of this cult of reason, the goal of this French Revolution, right? The big goal was to create the perfect man, the perfection of mankind, right? Through having the right thoughts, right? So, and you would then attain truth and liberty, and its guiding principle was to exercise reason. So they did that in a massive slaughter. It encouraged congregational worship. It's not a religion at all, people, and devotional displays based on reason. Thus, the festival of reason. Yeah. So that's what they did. Perfectly reasonable. Right. Now to continue. So we've seen this before. Now you know that these ideas, compassion, reason, justice, the best scientific understanding, do not distort scientific facts, okay? Inspire nobility in action, the spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice, okay? This is very, very similar to the Islamic view of intention over outcome, which is the niyat. Because, you see, remember, there are no consequences within atheism for committing sin. There is no sin, in fact, right? Except what they define as sin today, but there's no real eternal sin because there's no divine moral law to break. So in Islam, you have the niyat, which is intention. And a Muslim, as long as he has the intention, right, then it is good. The outcome does not matter. So this is the concept they have of intention. And here they've got the similar idea. The intentions are good. The outcomes don't matter. The intention was to bring about a better world. That they had to murder 30 million people to do it. Well, that's a small price to pay for perfection. As you know, now that comes from the church. Well, this is from the Satanic Temple, right? Now, LaVey, now let's look at Anton LaVey. So humanist Satanism is mostly atheistic. So LaVey's Satanism is atheistic, oddly enough, and described as a carnal religion, a lot like the cult of reason in France was a carnal religion. Followers believe that all gods are fictitious, okay? That ultimate importance is found in the self and pursuing self-interest, so the worship of yourself. Now, they claim within the Satanic Temple, at least, that Satan is not a deity to venerate, but a metaphor, the ultimate adversary of irrationality and religious beliefs. So they are adopting the role of Satan, who opposes and stands against biblical beliefs, Christian beliefs. And of course, yeah.
Isn't that a contrast? How can you be a Satanist and an atheist simultaneously?
Ask Aaron Ra. He came out as a Satanist not that long ago. Isn't that a contradiction? Isn't that just interesting?
I don't know. I think they're both fundamentally anti-Christian God, so I think they're pretty compatible, actually.
It seems strange that how all out they want to go against the Christian God at that. They want to go after the God of the Bible. They seem to be somewhat reluctant to go after the God of the Quran or any one of the many millions of gods of Hinduism, considering that Hinduism in itself has probably like 1.2 billion followers and adherents. So it's, if there is no God in their point of view, why have they singled out the Christian God for their point of attack?
Well, yes, that's a fairly good question. Now, here we have a statement for them. You can have secular symbolism, ritual, and pageantry, and it's very effective in something that is part of the nature of the human animal, which is exactly what the cult of reason had. The ritual chamber can be a place where you can dramatically perform what I call self-transformational psychodrama. And we will see, as we go through the series, you will find that these secular humanists claim that psychology is what will bring man salvation. Acting out, being his authentic self will bring him salvation. So these claims of Satanism versus those claims made by the secular humanists line up 100%. We release the emotions that we find would be injuring us in the regular pursuit of our happiness so that we can let them go. And then, of course, we have Lucian Greaves from the Satanic Temple, the spokesman. It's not that we're just looking for disorder, chaos, and to undermine Western civilization. We're really trying to endorse for Enlightenment values, bringing reason and respect for science into bettering the human condition. And this could have been said by Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. So, yeah, Daniel Dennett, they all say the same things.
But when they're using the word science, respect for science, they're not determining or defining what science they're actually talking about. I know you guys know exactly where I'm coming from. I'm always going to, my default in these discussions is always Darwinian evolution, because that's what I think the science that they're referring to. But if that's not the case, what is the science do you guys think they're referring to?
I mean, so science, around the turn of the century, the term science was just used as a synonym for reason. So when you see the word science in this type of literature, that's probably what they mean. They probably just mean we're reasonable people, and then we submit to reason, which of course is equally vague as to what that means exactly, but that's most likely what they have in mind. And then we did have a super chat here from Time is Fleeting. Atheists are bigger sickos than even Christians and fake ex-Muslims. They beat me up in the masjid yesterday. I praise Allah for saving me. That is ironic. He's not actually a Muslim.
Dude, make it 20 pounds next time, dude. Come on. Don't be cheap and stingy, buddy.
He didn't want me to actually read it, apparently. He said, no.
I went to look up the scientific definition of atheism, and it says that atheism is the belief that your beliefs are not a belief.
No, right. Time is Fleeting is a good friend. He's a good guy. But that was a joke. Okay. Obviously.
Okay, so anyway, so he says that, so they're endorsing for Enlightenment values. So why would Satanists want Enlightenment values, right? Whose corner are they in? Satan's corner, I would assume. Okay, and they want to use science for bettering the human condition. So guys, Satanism and the aims of secular humanists line up exactly. And the Temple's 7 tenets speak to this worldview. They ask followers to act with compassion, respect the freedom of others, and take care that beliefs don't distort scientific facts. Sounds wonderful. Right. Now, the churches themselves were often stripped of all priestly objects. There were, in any case, urgent practical reasons for this. Church bells were needed for the arms foundries to make weapons, gold and silver for the Republic's treasury. This is exactly what the Nazis did during the war. They stripped all statues from cities to make weapons. They needed them for bombs and tanks and planes. So a great deal of the latter certainly found its way into the pockets of the de-Christianizers. But there's also pure vandalism on a massive scale. I mean, man, if you read through the historic destruction, the destruction of buildings, beautiful historical pieces, it is shocking. I read through that. My gosh, it is incredible how much damage they caused. There was also pure vandalism on a massive scale. Altar pieces were slashed, stained glass windows broken, devotional manuals and hymnals were burned in bonfires. So they burned books, right? And then, of course, so it was hugely destructive. So these guys were hugely destructive. So the Bishop of Paris and the clergy were to attend in order to publicly renounce their belief and functions as ministers of the Catholic Church, declaring that from now on they would recognize no public worship but that of liberty, equality, and fraternity. This is equivalent to the struggle sessions that the communists put people through. And when they say equality, they have a very specific meaning of equality. This is the very communist meaning of equality, right? And of course, the opening words were by a Prussian nobleman who was instrumental in the French Revolution. He declared that the Republic would contain one God only, the people. This is Marx, the people, right? And some people describe the Festival of Reason as lurid, licentious, or scandalous. Sexual debauchery was the result of them applying their reason. So reason here seems to be how do we not get judged by God? How do we circumvent the moral laws of the church? How do we give ourselves freedom to do whatever you want. Your guys' thoughts before I go on?
Well, it seems that atheism is removing God in order to practice its sexual deviations and fornications, and Islam built image in the image of a man that wanted to practice his deviations and his sexual fornications.
I have a couple comments from the audience here that I want to highlight. XYZ says vandalism, ISIS. And that is a very interesting connection, is it not? That these people pursuing pure reason just happened to do vandalism that benefited them economically. Similarly, ISIS, they say they're blowing up these pagan religious sites that haven't been used as a religious site in 1,000 years because they want to get rid of the paganism, and then they loot the artifacts and they sell them on the black market. Very interesting.
Yeah, so complete parallels.
He never returned as a horse says science. I keep getting an image of the master CPU from the original Tron movie. I thought that one was pretty good. And then from Billy Mandalay, it feels like there's quite a lot of atheists in Pakistan and India these days. And I think that's probably true. And I think that this is a call to us, that people are leaving Islam because it doesn't offer any truth, but they're not seeing any alternative. They're not seeing Christianity as a possibility, and the only thing they see is atheism. It's I'm a Muslim or I'm an atheist. Those are the only two options. So we need to, be making the effort to reach into these societies and give them the option of Christianity.
Yeah, if you remember, Thaddeus, when I first got interviewed by you a couple of years ago, that's exactly what I said, that in those countries, India, Pakistan, and such places, communism is very big because it's a natural default that when you leave Sikhism, Hinduism, or Islam, your natural default is to go towards atheism and communism.
Yeah, communism and atheism are effectively synonymous. So the word lurid means causing horror or revulsion. So according to the writings of the day, these temples of reason had displays that were lurid. So these sexual displays, the debauchery there was causing horror or revulsion, shocking, right? Sexual in an uncontrolled and socially unacceptable way. But this was reasonable. So yeah, there you go. Now we've got Robespierre, the man of terror's state cult. So after this embarrassment, right, eventually, once Napoleon seized power, eventually just put everything back to normal and said, look, you guys have gone off the rails. So after this embarrassment, Robespierre achieved dictatorial power, decided to establish his own state religion, the cult of the supreme being. So this new deistic religion was intended to curb the excesses associated with the de-Christianization movement and the replacement of Catholicism, because they were replacing Catholicism with their own religion. It briefly lasted for only 1 year in 1794. Now, this deism, this idea is that there is a God, but he got drunk and fell down the stairs, passed out, he's in a coma, and he hasn't been seen for 4,000 years. So he created the world and fell off the bus somehow and got, no one's seen him since. So this is a God that just disappeared, isn't there? It's a very convenient device to tell people, okay, well, he is a God, but anyway, he's not around, so we're managing the world now, so just listen to what we say, right? So now, the cult of the supreme being supported the idea of a supreme being and immortality of the soul. However, it was not consistent with Christian doctrine, as the only way virtue could be attained was through fidelity and devotion to liberty and democracy. So you had to be loyal to the Sharia of the ruling class at that point, or the people in charge. And yeah, that's basically what it is, follow the Sharia. Right, so before I go on, so I'll let you guys, any comments?
What? Go ahead. I thought Thunderous was about to talk. One from the audience here, Green Eagles said, could it be that Christians are persecuted, so rather than look to God, they look to atheism in India and Pakistan? And that's absolutely true. Muslim children are often taught that all non-Muslims are bad. All non-Muslims are inferior. But Christians, those are the worst of all creatures. No idea where they got that idea from, but they often are taught that, so that when someone leaves Islam, they determine that it isn't true. The last thing on their mind is to think about Christianity.
Yeah. Okay, so
It's
now let's look.
sorry, just to finish that thought, it's a system that's set up to be explicitly anti-Christian. It's not a system that is, against all other religions. It is vaguely, but it's explicitly anti-Christian.
Yeah, that much is true. It is. So now we're going to look at atheists and something called the drownings at Nantes. So these revolutionary atheists, and understand you have revolutionary communists, and these were socialists, right? So these were revolutionary atheists. They passed a law that all non-conforming clergy, that is clergy that wouldn't renounce Christianity and become secular priests of atheism, their job would be to preach about science and the virtues of science, right? So these priests had to preach about the virtues of science from the pulpit. And if they refused to do that, and of course we hear secular humanists and atheists today speak about the virtues of science and science this and science that, all non-conforming clergy would be killed on sight. Anyone who harbored these enemies were subject to death. Families, men, women, and children who hid these people, protected them, were murdered. Jean-Baptiste Carrier enforced the law by loading priests and nuns like cattle onto boats, ferrying them down the Loire River. They were stripped naked, and they were tied together in pairs, one priest per nun, in republican marriages designed to mock their vows of celibacy. They were then thrown overboard to drown. This proved far too inefficient, right, for mass executions. So Carrier sank the vessels with everyone trapped on board, drowning them in what was dubbed the national bathtub. Between 4,800 and 9,000 people, these are priests, including families, men, women, and children who protected these people, who looked after them. Because if you protected them, your whole family was killed. So these people were murdered. So up to 9,000 people were murdered in the drownings at Nantes, including innocent families with women and children, all in the cause of atheism. These people were murdered in the name of reason, murdered in the name of atheism. And according to historian Reinhold Secher, these murders are one component of a systematic policy, a scientific, reasonable policy of extermination, a genocide of the residents of the Vendée that was planned by the Revolutionary Committee of Public Safety. So the Committee of Public Safety, in the name of safety, they had to murder 9,000 people, mostly priests and nuns, and approved by a vote of the National Convention in Paris on 1 October 1793. This is, and not only that, they would round up people, make them dig long ditches, line them up in front of the ditches, and then shoot them. And this is what the Soviets did. So they made these mass graves, and hundreds of people died that way too.
How similar is that to when Muhammad murdered about, was it 600, 900 in a day, or when he beheaded 600 to 900 in a day, men, and just looking at their the boys with their pubic hair, and if they had pubic hair, then they were slaughtered too. How similar is that?
I mean, there's certainly overlap. Muslims could claim, well, there was war, but the thing is, that's still a war crime. And those kids were not fighting. I mean, so this was a war crime. But this was cold-blooded murder.
So, probing question here from Gospel Truth. If Christianity is all myth and folklore, why on earth would atheists bother coming on this live stream? Or you can say, why would atheists bother spending all their time arguing against Christianity? And, this is one of the contradictions of atheism. Now, to be clear, there are plenty of people who are not religious, who never think about religion, but the kind of people who self-identify as atheists and are vocal about it, they're totally living in contradiction to their own belief. They believe that everything is meaningless, yet they spend all of their time trying to argue with other people who hold meaningless beliefs.
Yeah. No, they're
Also
proselytizers.
Yes, exactly. Which doesn't make any sense if, they're just people who have a lack of belief. Lucent said, can't help but notice that a lot of things are explicitly anti-Christian instead of anti-religion, which actually grows my faith. Thank you for that comment. And one more from Emma here. Thoughts on religious relativism. In religious studies at the university level, there's a big atheist presence and emphasis on examining every religion as if it's a cult. I don't think we'll get to it today, but later in this presentation, we definitely have some material on why atheists seem to be so prevalent in the education system. But what about this first part of it? What do you guys feel about religious relativism? This idea that all religions are basically the same. Is this coming from an atheist mindset, or is that something different? Thunderous,
as you've
your
mentioned, they
thoughts?
think it's all false. So all religions are false. So all religions are the same in the sense that they are false. One could read it like that. But
Exactly.
also, they could be projecting the fact that they are relativists as well. They are moral relativists themselves. They have no fixed or absolute sense of morals. There's nothing that's there's nothing that's a divine moral code. And they claim, in fact, that the science changes, so we must change our minds as we go. Well, pedophilia is bad today, but tomorrow, the science has changed. Pedophilia is good today. It's a great thing. That's exactly the position they're in. And
anything you want to add?
Yeah, just same as what Lloyd said, that from the point of view of an atheist, as far as religious relativism is concerned, it's all wrong, it's all bad, it's all wrong. So in that context, it's relative.
Yeah, and I think that this is very sneaky aspect of modern culture. We're taught repeatedly to respect all religions. You can't question someone's religious belief. You just have different ways of seeing the world. You're basically the same. And why I said it's sneaky is because the unspoken assumption is they're all basically the same because they're all equally false.
Yeah, but they're contradictory, so you cannot hold these contradictories. Only one
Right.
of them can win.
Right. You can't hold more than one of them, but you can say they're all false. And that's what the person advocating for that probably really believes deep down, that they believe that they all are essentially nonsense. We don't believe that, but the person advocating for this religious relativism where all religions are equally valid, they probably deep down believe that they're all false. They might not consciously believe that. They want to believe that everyone's true, but deep down, they don't really believe in any of them. And that's the point. They're exactly like the atheist.
So Jean-Baptiste Carrier, who carried out these murders, said, "Never have I had so much amusement as in seeing the last grimaces of priests as they die." So,
You could substitute the word priest with Jews and Christians, and you can substitute the name Jean-Baptiste Carrier with Muhammad.
Yeah, and you can do that with Stalin. Yes, exactly. Now let's look at the atheists and the nuns of Compiègne. So what happens here is the reign of terror flooded the streets with innocent blood, claiming over 40,000 victims. It went on to claim, obviously, hundreds of thousands. July 17, 1794, the martyrs of Compiègne were led to the guillotine in Paris. The government had ordered, this is an atheist government based on reason and the Enlightenment values. Okay, these are enlightened people acting out of reason and atheism. And to enforce atheism, the government ordered all convents to disband. These nuns refused to split apart and kept their community together. So the revolutionary atheists judged the nuns as traitors for their defiance and condemned them to death by beheading. Each woman, according to the history here, went very bravely to the blade. The nuns sang a hymn which grew softer and softer as their numbers dwindled until at last the final voice was silenced. The Mother Superior was the last to be beheaded and killed. The revolutionary government of France fell 10 days after the nuns were murdered. So, any comment before I go on?
I think that one pretty much speaks for itself.
So, yeah. And right, so Edmund Burke. So now this is Edmund Burke on atheistical fanaticism. We cannot be ignorant of the spirit of atheistical fanaticism And atheists are the first to tell me, atheists are not fanatics. We're not fanatical, you bigot. Okay? That is inspired by a multitude of writings. So this atheistical fanaticism was inspired by a multitude of writings, dispersed with incredible personal attention and expense, and by sermons delivered in all the streets and places in Paris. These atheistical fathers have a bigotry of their own. They have learned to talk against monks with the spirit of a monk. But in some things, they are men of the world. Their resources of intrigue are called in to supply the defects of argument and wit. So they lacked proper argument and wit. They were defects. And so to this system of literary monopoly was joined an unremitting industry to blacken and discredit in every way and by every means all those who did not hold to their faction. These guys were clearly Democrats. To those who have observed their spirit of conduct, it has long been clear that nothing was wanted but the power of carrying the intolerance of the tongue and of the pen into a persecution which would strike at property, liberty, and life. So this is Reflections on the Revolution in France, 1790. So Edmund Burke gave this talk in London. So yeah, this is a comment at the time. These people were fanatical about this, and they were whipped into a frenzy by very, very aggressive writing against Christianity. So, for instance, here's an example. Percy Bysshe Shelley, very famous poet and inbreeder or wannabe inbreeder, he wanted to marry his cousin Harriet Grove. Do you know of another religion where they encourage you to marry your cousin, Thaddeus?
Well, in fairness, atheism doesn't encourage him to marry his cousin, so that would be a difference there.
It doesn't have any particular. Now, I remember Darwin and his whole thing. He encouraged that stuff. I mean, but Darwin's a story for another day. Darwin, oh my God, people have no idea who Darwin was and what he was about. But that's for another day.
On him.
No, Darwin, oh my God, Darwin is, oh, good grief. Anyway, he wanted to marry his cousin. He'd been rejected. He believed on account of his religious unbelief, and he wrote, amongst other things, "I will stab the wretch in secret." That's Christianity. And he mentions here, this is the cry of Voltaire, "Écraser l'infâme," okay? And how I wish I were the Antichrist, that were mine to crush the demon, to hurl him to his native hell. And he goes on, he says, "Christianity is unreasonable and incredible. Irreligious periods in world history were the most peaceful." That's what he writes. Okay, amongst other things. And the guy actually got thrown out of Oxford for publishing a pamphlet on atheism, calling it the necessity of atheism. Right. So he was an atheist, and this guy hated that. But of course, notice that they are bringing up satanic imagery, which is very, very interesting for an atheist.
He went on to say that he wishes he was the Antichrist. Well, had he read 1 John 2:22, he'll have known he'll have achieved that straight away.
Yeah, but notice he wants to crush the demons. So according to him, Christianity is demonic, evil. And this is exactly the same language. This is entirely the same language as Richard Dawkins.
And the Talmud.
Man, the Talmud's a long, complex story, and I wouldn't be so quick to state anything there, because the Talmud is a very complex subject, and it's people oversimplifying, to be quite honest, lie about it left and right. Now, the Jacobins, a society without God. This is the first attempt to create a society consciously without God. And this was with the French Jacobins in the 1790s with their atheistic cult of reason. And their watchword here was liberty and equality. Great stuff. Jacobins were members of a democratic club found in France known as the Society of Friends of the Constitution. Democrats for sure. They desired to purify society with their pure atheism. This was pure atheism. And to implement their moral vision on earth, they wanted to destroy Christianity. Their moral position left them in no doubt as to what to do with their ideological enemies. In Western France alone, they killed 250,000 people who had attempted to adhere to the old religion. They imprisoned apparently like another 300,000 or something. Crazy number of people that were suffering under oppression. The Jacobins weren't having this. They slaughtered them. So they were in favor of the centralized power of the state. They were socialists. These are seriously left-leaning. Okay, these guys are radical left. In fact, today they'd just be called Democrats. And they were hostile to any idea of its weakening or dismemberment. Your thoughts before we go on?
I was going to let Thunderous go first, but
Well, I was going to say the third point now that reads there, they desire to purify society and implement their moral vision on the world, and they want to destroy Christianity. The difficulty with that is, how do they define what the moral vision is? Who determines what the moral vision is? How is it worked out what the moral vision is? And what's the basis? And is it a moral vision that changes with time? Because you mentioned earlier on about sex for children earlier on, and you and I have discussed this before with MAPS, which is minor attracted persons, which is what we see today. But how did they define it back then?
Oh, so basically, in one of the statements, I'll probably come across it later, they state, we are not Christians, we do the opposite of what the Christians do. So that was their moral position.
Yeah,
gospel truth, strawmanning Christianity based on the malevolent popes. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, don't worry about that question. We'll come back to that at the end in the discussion after the presentation. But I did want to point out that it's very interesting how often these enlightened free thinkers, one, have violent desires. They want to crush things and destroy things. And two, how often they're motivated by sexual behavior that is considered inappropriate by Christianity. And then suddenly, after they have these desires, they discover that, hey, Christianity is false. So we need to crush and destroy it. Why do you need to crush and destroy it? Just because it's false. Lots of things are false. Oh, right, because it tells you not to do the sexual things, and they're usually sexual. Maybe not always, but usually sexual things that you want to do.
Is it a case of the more debased you are, the more enlightened you are? So, the more debased I become, the more enlightened I am. Then it's like a series of one-man upsmanship. Well, I'm more debased than you, so that must mean I'm more enlightened than you. And then somebody else comes along and think, I can think of more deviation than what you two guys have got put together. So I'm more enlightened to you, both of you as a collective, and so on and so forth.
The view of these people, and Marx wrote about it when he spoke of the opium of religion being the opium of the people, and it's a much longer passage which you really should look at. But basically, religion is what hinders man from finding reason and logic. Religion, especially Christianity, is what holds man back from finding his godhood, his perfection, his true expression. Religion is the drug that keeps you asleep, and when you take away the drug, you go woke.
How is that any different from anything what Aleister Crowley wrote then?
Nothing. That's the same. We've just shown it matches exactly up with all the same things.
That's the point.
Yeah. So yeah, let me continue here. So just briefly speaking, Christians have been killed long before they had any kind of standing in society. The Romans were murdering Christians. Remember, they died as witnesses or martyrs, right? They were running the gauntlet of whips. They were savaged by wild beasts. They were roasted in iron chairs so that they were suffocated by the reek of their own flesh as it cooked. Christians were being killed just because, right? Now, in the Roman view, a god best displayed his power by protecting those who worshipped him, not by demanding their deaths. And don't forget how many atheists say, I don't see any proof of your God. Your God's not protecting you. That's the Roman view. That's the pagan view. And remember, Jesus does say, my kingdom is not of this world. Right? So Romans, now this term also, it's the Romans, they bound themselves to their God. And so this idea, now it's odd that you've got these Romans who were very religious, right? And the Greeks were very religious, but yet these secular humanists very much identify with these cultures, with these empires, and with this concept of secular humanism with these Greek and ancient cultures. Okay, yeah, guys. So, okay, yeah. So notice it was our aim, as one emperor put it, to set everything right, to ensure that the Christians be returned to sanity. So the Christians had to be killed. The Christians had to be tortured and punished to bring them back to sanity. And this is exactly what the French revolutionaries did. So, yeah. And this is writing about Islam. Yeah. So, yeah. So notice they wanted to remake man and woman into a new being, which is what Hitler wanted to do with the Übermensch. This is what the communists want to do with the communist man. It's what the fascists want to do with the fascist man. And these people all wanted to remake man and woman into a new being, and that's what secular humanists want, because they want to remake man in the image of man. They believe they can perfect man this way. So yeah, so Thaddeus, yeah, I don't know how long are we planning to go. What's the aim here?
Yeah, I
We
mean,
can,
I
mean,
think
90
that,
minutes, right?
yeah, I think we wanted to keep it around 90 minutes, which is where we are. So I don't want to just cut off arbitrarily, though. So
Mm,
if you're at the end of one subject, that would be a good time to stop. If not, finish up the subject you're currently on.
okay. So here's a point from historian Michael Burley. He's at the Hoover Institution in Stanford. I probably spelled that wrong. The Jacobin effort to do away with Christianity and build a society based on rational thought ended in extreme violence. Remember, there is no moral hold on them at this point. There's no consequence. The Jacobins were not unique. He points out that societies which have rejected God have not escaped mankind's violent nature. But this is a direct claim made by secular humanists and atheists all the time, that atheism will bring peace. Atheism will prevent war. What it did bring was the most violent century in human history, the single most violent century ever, right? So he said, if you subtract God and the notion of an afterlife, then there's a real risk in the political utopianism so deadly in the 20th century that you will attempt to create heaven on earth. You'll go for a quick fix in the here and now to have the arrogant illusion that you can remake man and woman into some sort of new being, right? So you've removed the Christian indoctrination, and now you're going to give them your atheist, secular humanist indoctrination, and this will make them perfect, and that invariably results in hell for ordinary people, as he tells us. All right. So I wondered, maybe that's a good place to just end off for the moment. So we've covered some interesting history as to the very first secular atheist state and how they eventually just ended up in genocide. Don't forget, Russia, Soviet Union, and the whole communist enterprise, that was secular atheist. Marx was a humanist. Marx was a secular humanist. Right? All of these people, all these Italians, all these crazy, all the German Marxists, all of these people were secular humanists. And they were atheists. Hitler, not very likely not an atheist, but that said, they all were anti-Christian, and communism is directly anti-Christian, anti-religious, and atheist.
All right. Thank you very much for that presentation, Lloyd. I have a couple things that I saved from the chat that I thought would be good questions for us to discuss as a group before we sign off. If people have other questions related to today's material, go ahead and put those in the chat now. The feedback we got previously, the last couple of times Lloyd and I had a show, was that people enjoyed keeping the shows to a length of, between 1 and 2 hours. When it goes longer than that. Yeah, I was about to remember, but you got it. That when it goes longer, people get lost. So we're trying to take the material slow, to go through it carefully, and give people an opportunity to absorb it. So I hope that people were able to do that today. So I had a question that was given fairly early on. Is there any solid basis for atheism? I mean, real science or logic that can prove their beliefs. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
Yeah, I will go to my default position as far as atheism is concerned. Atheism, for me, in every conversation I've had with an atheist, is that their atheism is predicated on evolution, Darwinian evolution, I might add, for which there is zero evidence of. But that's a separate discussion that we might be able to bring up later on in the presentation.
Your thoughts, Lloyd?
I would refer to this paper this paper that on the origin of secular humanism, which is directly atheistic. But of course, it states that this entire atheistic enterprise is a religion. Right? And the humanist rhetorical attack upon traditional religion is the founding principle of humanism. It is not there as a positive force to do something. It is there as a negative force to attack Christianity. Right? So Christianity is the enemy. Right? Now, they say here that humanists assert science as an authority. They assert that the accumulation of data through science has rendered most religious tenets false, which I would assume would be marriage would now be rendered false because science has proven that, And they claim that everything that religion says has been proven false by science. And they say that any claim derived from anything other than science is of necessity false. So their worldview of necessity excludes anything that is not within that worldview, right? And so these lines of argument pivot on assumptions about truth and science that they said, okay, we believe so and so, and anything that's not within that, that's by definition false. And humanists, it says they have neither corroborated nor acknowledged these assumptions. And humanists have fallen into a scientific dogmatism, which is rigid in the guise of the spirit of science and scientific industry. So it states that they've never defined what exactly do they mean by this science. It's very, very vague in all of their writings. So no, it's just an assertion. They've created this association between themselves and science, and you, in fact, are not scientific unless you're a humanist. You're not a humanist. You are unscientific, illogical, unreasonable, and in fact, according to Dawkins, evil.
Which is a man that got married 3 times.
Whatever, I mean, yeah. That's Dawkins. We'll talk more about Dawkins later.
So to pose the question to myself, I think that we can see that atheists struggle to find any basis for their belief in how they argue. 90% of the time when I have a conversation with an atheist, they do not wish to support their position. They only wish to assert that it's the default position, that I win by default. I disproved Christianity, therefore atheism is true. Sound familiar, perhaps, with what our Muslim friends do? They mostly argue against Christianity and just assume that makes Islam true, at least in their conversations with Christians. And I think that it's because atheists know that the few positive arguments that are attempted are not very good. That the most generally considered the best argument for atheism is the problem of evil, but it's a problem for atheism just as much as it is a problem for Christianity. The problem of evil is a problem for everyone. Everyone needs to explain why we perceive there to be great evil in the world. And Christians, it's difficult because we believe that God is good and all-powerful, all good and all-powerful, which makes the presence of evil hard to understand. For the atheist, it's equally hard because they believe there is no such thing as good and evil, yet they look at the world and they think that there's a lot of evil in it. So it's a problem for them as well. It's a problem for everyone. I think Christianity does have good answers, to be clear.
If I can mention something, the argument from evil poses a particular problem because the idea of evil is a very, very Christian view, the way that we define evil. Because apart from an objective moral law, there is no objective way of ultimately defining evil. So the existence of evil presupposes a divine moral law with which to differentiate good from evil. Now, so atheists try to disprove God with an argument that's valid only if God exists. They claim this is evil, but it can only be evil if there's a God to use as the standard to judge against. So, I mean, atheists love abortion, right? So for them, abortion is a fundamental human right, and the freedom to choose is a good that must not be infringed. Now here's the thing. So atheists are allowed to kill babies, right? But of course, this is a good thing. Now, when God killed in the Bible 2,000, 3,000 years ago, or whatever, 3,000 years ago, this is supposed to be evil. So when God makes choices between life and death, God is evil, but when the atheist makes choices between life and death, this is good. That's a contradiction. This is entirely hypocritical. So if we choose who lives and dies, we are ethical, we are correct, we are good, right? So this is, so they are defining good and evil apart from an objective moral standard. They're making it up as they go.
Would you also agree then with that, Lloyd, where in the Bible it says he created a male and female predicated on whether you have the male genitalia or the female genitalia, but atheists now say, well, your genitalia does not define you. You can decide what you are, whether you are male or female. Your genitalia is an irrelevance. And
part of the secular humanist creed is that, and they claim not to have a creed, but part of their understanding is that there is no distinction between your soul. I mean, you are what you think you are. There's no soul, so there's no distinction between soul and body. So therefore, you are what you think you are. And of course, if you give up those Christian ideas of morality and how the world is seen, that worldview, automatically you'll go back to paganism, because Christianity was the replacement of paganism.
We have the atheist Black Diamond in the chat demonstrating this contradiction, because he said, is this the same God that murdered a whole city for gay sex and sin? But that question only makes sense if there's something wrong with killing a whole city of people, which his belief system doesn't allow him to do. and I asked him to justify what in his belief system tells him that this is wrong, and his response is, I don't have a belief system. I just don't believe your BS. Amazing stuff here, Black Diamond. So you have beliefs that it's wrong to kill a whole city of gay people, as you put it. You use the word murder. Murder is a judgment. So you clearly think it is wrong. Yet you don't have any beliefs. You just believe that my beliefs are wrong. And we are the king of straw man arguments, because I asked him to justify his own position. I am the king of a straw man argument because I asked him to justify his position. Amazing stuff.
Now, understand, they've got to go back, I don't know how many hundreds of years, thousands of years, right? We can look at the atheist experiment in the 20th century, where atheists received government control of countries, took political control through violence, by the way. So revolution is part and parcel. As Marx said, atheism begins where communism begins. And revolution, violent revolution, jihad, is part and parcel of this whole atheist enterprise. And it was the most bloody century in history.
Well,
see, now he says, yes, your beliefs are wrong. That's exactly what I said. It's a belief that their beliefs are not a belief. So they have no beliefs, but their beliefs are better than your beliefs.
Lloyd, I don't have any beliefs. I just believe that atheism is wrong. Sorry. I misstated that. I don't have any beliefs. Atheism is just BS.
I have a
belief. Yeah.
I have a belief, and it's science-based if the atheist would like to know about it, and that is the anus doesn't lubricate.
Yeah, so understand. So when you read the history of secular humanism, it states very bluntly that they provide no justification for these. What are these scientific views that they hold? How does that apply to situations where science doesn't have any sway?
So Black Diamond, you said look up the definition of atheist. Obviously, you don't know it. Well, the traditional definition of atheist, which apparently you don't know, is someone who has a positive belief in the proposition that there is no God. So apparently you need to look up the definition of atheist, or, you're just redefining it, which is as the lack of belief. Fine. You don't have any beliefs. You have no belief about Christianity. You have no belief whether it's wrong or right to kill a gay person, since that is the issue you chose to bring up. Thank you. Or you can admit that you're a human being who does have beliefs about what is right and wrong. Your choice.
Actually, hold on. If I may, can I share my screen? Can I do something here? Because I have a comment on that.
Absolutely.
If I may. Okay, this is coming up in a moment. Right. Okay, so atheism is not a lack of belief, okay? It comes from theos, okay, without God. So it's not a lack of belief. It defines itself as being without God. Now, they claim that atheism isn't a belief like theism, therefore needing no evidence, okay? They claim evidence is not needed for non-positions. Now, if it's a non-position, it's a psychological state. However, the moment you have a position on something, the moment you have a positive and negative position on something, that is not a psychological state. That is an ideological position. You're making arguments for something or arguments against something. Then you have a position. So now notice, let's see. Atheism is a rejection of religious beliefs. Let's have a look here. The Concise Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Okay, This is from William Rowe, an atheist. Atheism is the position that affirms the non-existence of God. It proposes positive disbelief rather than mere suspension of belief. Okay, fine. The Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy. There are multiple senses of the word atheism, but it is clear which is standard in philosophy. It is the view that there are no gods. The widely used sense denotes merely not believing in God and is consistent with agnosticism. A stricter sense denotes a belief that there is no God. This has become the standard. Poyman, 2015. Let's look at the Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So according to the most usual definition, an atheist is a person who maintains that there is no God, that the sentence God exists expresses a false proposition. So it's a position. In the book Arguing About Gods, Graham Oppy, an atheist, repeatedly treats agnostic in the psychological sense of someone who suspends judgment about God's existence, and atheist as mutually exclusive categories, 2006. Atheism, from the Greek atheos, is the philosophical position that God does not exist. It's distinguished from agnosticism, which is that it is impossible to know whether he exists or not. That's the American Academic Encyclopedia. Atheism, system of thought developed around the denial of God's existence. So a system of thought around the denial. So defined first appeared during the Enlightenment Age of Reason. That's the Random House Encyclopedia, 1977. Oxford Companion to Philosophy, 1995. Atheism is the doctrine that there is no God. A doctrine, notice, doctrine. Some atheists support this claim by arguments, but these are usually directed against the Christian concept of God and are largely irrelevant to other possible gods. Typo there, we fix that. Atheism, Greek, atheos, God. Okay, a and theos is the view that there is no divine being, no God. Dictionary of Philosophy, 1996. Atheism is the belief that God does not exist. That's a belief. The World Book Encyclopedia, 91. According to the most usual definition of an atheist is a person who maintains that there is no God, and they reject eccentric definitions of the word. Encyclopedia of Philosophy, 1967. Atheism is the doctrine that God does not exist. That belief in the existence of God is a false belief. The word God here refers to a divine being regarded as the independent creator of a world, being superlatively powerful, wise, and good. Encyclopedia of Religion, 1987. Atheism denies the existence of deity. Funk and Wagnall's New Encyclopedia. Atheism is a dogmatic creed consisting in the denial of every word, every kind of supernatural power. Atheism has not been seriously maintained at any period of civilized thought. Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, Volume 11. So just on that point, if I may, so understand, yes, I did actually look up the definition. I've given you several. There's more to be found if you want to take the time, but yes, it is not what you said, buddy.
So we have the rebuttal here from Black Diamond. Straw man arguments. All those encyclopedias, they're straw men. He apparently doesn't know what the term
wrote
means.
Those. A bunch of atheists actually wrote those definitions.
And then he has the... Sorry. Then he has the ultimate proof that he's correct. I don't care the claims you make. I don't care what encyclopedia you use. So he tells us to look up the definition, which apparently what we were actually supposed to do is get out a scanner, scan his brain, find the definition in his brain, and believe that definition rather than looking it up in what textbooks say.
Didn't he say to look it up to get the definition? So I looked up the definition in the best academic resources that are used in universities today.
Yeah, but you didn't look at it in the original Greek language when it was first written. You need to go back to the Greek and understand the Greek. You're looking at a translation of the Greek. So this is the problem.
Yeah. So he doesn't care because Abdul, his name is Abdul. Sorry, can we call you Abdul?
Yeah, let's call him Abdul Diamond.
Yeah, Abdul Diamond. Yeah, he's hard as a rock. His brain is thick as a rock. Clearly.
Well, you know,
and also notice, I don't believe the claims you make. These are not claims I'm making. I am reading from I went through a list of the best academic encyclopedias from Oxford, Yale, Harvard, you name it. We just went through that list. And but remember, he's an anonymous internet troll. He knows more than every single academic resource ever created.
In my spare time, I actually teach against Darwinian evolution, and one of my favorite subjects is vestigial organs. But up until now, I have argued against the existence of vestigial organs. I can now honestly say that the brain of an atheist is a vestigial organ. I concede.
No, exactly. He doesn't care about truth. He doesn't care about facts, research, rationality, reason. No. He cares about his opinion because his default position is that he's right. You see?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And we're wrong. We're evil, in fact. Yeah.
He just repeated straw man again, which is amazing because I don't recall making any statement about his
position. Now he wants to change subject like a good Abdul. Like a good Abdul is now wanting to change the subject.
And then he says, what are you getting angry about? And I don't believe any of us are remotely angry. He might be mistaking my passionate answer for anger because he doesn't know what passion is. But
yeah, but he's a Muslim, by the way. Actually, yeah, someone's like Gabriel Shona was saying. I was about to mention it as well, and Gabriel mentioned this guy is a Muslim. I've seen him on, if not on Jay's channel, coming on as a Muslim.
Well, actually, that's very interesting because earlier he defined atheism as opposition to your God. And then he tried to ask me if I was an atheist about Zeus, as if that makes any sense. That's
yeah. So as far as I know, he's a Muslim. So just so you know.
But yeah, that's consistent, right? He's an atheist about the Christian God, as if that actually makes sense. But he's not an atheist about Allah. So Black Diamond, I want you to write in the chat that Allah is a fake God and Muhammad is a fake prophet who made
By the way, I had several other definitions I could have gone through. Okay, that whole thing goes on a lot longer. Okay, I mean, I went through about half of my references there, taken from academic sources. I went through about half of those, so there was a lot more to be said. So, I mean, in every single one of those, he has been proven wrong. Right? It's a position, it's a belief, it's an ideology, a creed.
Anyway, enough of that pointlessness. This was actually from earlier, but it's a good prophecy here. Atheism trying to make sense of their own meaninglessness. Black Diamond is trying to make sense of his own meaninglessness by redefining terms.
Isn't that what Muslims do?
Mm-hmm.
No, Allah. He spelled it wrong. So just please spell Allah correctly, Black Diamond. The full sentence again with Allah spelled correctly, if you don't mind. With the H on the end, if you don't mind, please.
Guys, I've got to go. So
okay, cool stuff, man. Thank you, Thunderous. Yeah, it's gone longer than I thought we'd do an hour or something, but we've gone a tad longer.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when I looked at the clock and saw we were at an hour and a half. That went by really quickly.
Yeah. Notice Allah. You see, notice he spelled it wrong. So he's talking about a different God. So he would need to actually give us the full name. So that's a cop out. That's Hiel. See, that's Hiel that he's practicing.
So I have one more question that I want to pose, but Completely Deist would like to join. He identifies as Jewish from a previous chat. Do you want to take that now, or do you need to go soon?
I mean, I don't have to go, but it's been 2 hours. I wasn't planning to go on for that long.
All right, yep.
I mean,
we'll take you a different time, Completely Deist. I just want to close out with, actually, I guess I have two questions. One,
so we're pathetic because we provided the entire series of definitions from major academic sources on atheism. So, what is the definition of atheism, and which authority do you cite? And are we supposed to believe your authority versus that in use across the academic institutions across the world, Black Diamond?
Well, we're pathetic.
Yeah.
Well, presumably we're pathetic because we asked him whether he was Muslim or not, or to prove he wasn't a Muslim, since some people said he was.
No, he's not. I've come across him before as a Muslim. Yeah. I've come across this guy before.
Whatever. Black Diamond, you're an atheist, you're a Muslim, whatever. It doesn't make any difference to me. They're both equally false belief systems.
So on this question, Green Eagles asks, when history books are written, do they tend to exclude atheistic bloodshed? Now, you must understand that the definition of genocide, as we have it today, as a legal term, was defined after World War II, right? So basically, because of what happened in World War II, they needed a legal definition, and they needed to charge people with genocide, right? Because that is considered the crime of crimes, right? Crimes against humanity. Do understand that at that point, Russia was an ally, and Stalin. So this is after World War II, right? So they needed to set up whatever. It wasn't directly after World War II, but when the legal definition was created, Stalin insisted that the definition could not be used to convict him of his crimes. So the things that Stalin was guilty of were excluded from the definition. So therefore, Stalin's crimes were not classed as genocides. So unfortunately, we do need a new definition of genocide. That is why Stalin is not considered as one of history's monsters, when he was one of the worst violent monsters, atheist monsters to ever walk the earth. So do understand. So yes, they do exclude atheistic bloodshed. They don't tell you that the French Revolution murdered in the name of atheism, in the name of reason and atheism and de-Christianization as an active process, as a systematic, organized process. So yeah, that is excluded from the history books.
Yeah, and I would say that sometimes they do talk about it, but they never mention it as being religiously motivated or motivated against religious people, if you prefer that terminology. They might say that there's violence, but it's always, the fact that it had anything to do with religion or anti-religion, more accurately, is glossed over if it's mentioned at all.
Yeah. So why do you think Black Diamond is able to, as a reasonable atheist who believes in evidence, facts, that he utterly dismissed, like what? I cited maybe 20 sources. I could have done a bunch more. Why would he just casually dismiss all of these major sources from, these are the top academic sources? Why would they suddenly be wrong? Why is he an authority we should listen to?
Yeah, because his non-belief system is that whatever he says is right and whatever someone else says is wrong, which means it's all about facts, obviously. So I did want to close out on this question. Jokes aside, could it be that these career atheists were exposed to false Christians of the 18th and 19th century? Now, Gospel Truth did follow this up by saying that he was referring to the popes. In that aspect, no. There definitely have been popes that were probably not Christians at all, and certainly not very good Christians who did lots of evil things. However, those would generally be in centuries prior to the 18th and 19th century. That was one of the reasons for the Protestant Reformation in the first place, was the abundant corruption in the Catholic Church. It largely corrected itself in those terms after the Reformation, that the corruption was largely rooted out. So in that case, I would say no. However, there is something else of note here, and that is in the 18th and 19th century is when academic criticism of Christianity was starting to filter down to the public. Is this time where Christians were being exposed to information which was shocking, and although it shouldn't have, it caused them to have doubts. Like, for example, the rediscovery of the Gnostic Gospels. This was coming out in this time period. And, people said, well, why were these excluded? Well, the reason they're excluded from the Bible is because they're very lately written. They had nothing to do with the historical Jesus, et cetera, et cetera. So it shouldn't have caused anyone doubt. But the mere fact that I've never heard this information before caused some problems. And the church was not prepared to deal with this. And as a result, in fairness, a lot of Christians did retreat into an anti-intellectual position where they said, I have faith, I don't have to prove anything. That's no longer the case. We now have good answers. We now have intellectual high ground to stand upon. But I do think that is one of the roots of the rise of atheism, is these centuries-old debunked academic theories. Anything you want to add, Lloyd?
Yeah, there's two things. So first, I want to go back to Peter 2 apologetics. He asked a question. I just want to get to that. Why do atheists say, "Oh my God"? Well, because atheists today have been raised in Christian culture. They are actually subconsciously have a Christian moral sense to a large degree. They have Christian. Tom Holland speaks about this. He's an atheist. He was influenced by Nietzsche, who, as we know, is dead and was also suffering from syphilis and went crazy. But he states very bluntly that he realized when he was researching for one of his books, Dominion, that he realized just how the Christian worldview changed the world, how cruel paganism was, how we glorify Greek and Rome, but they were cruel, extremely violent pagan cultures that we would not recognize, that were alien to us. And he says that atheists are, without realizing it, are steeped in Christian tradition, Christian morals, Christian values, and they are basically Christianized atheists. And then so the question was, no, atheism goes back. You'd have to go back to the 15th century. I wouldn't want to go back well before that, but if you look at the book by The Prince by Machiavelli, that is atheist. I mean, the man's an atheist, and he doesn't believe in God. So these ideas go back. It wasn't about the 18th. It started much before, and it became institutionalized in the 15th and 16th centuries, and of course under the Enlightenment, late 17th century, and then of course late 18th century. This is where these ideas. You have to go back to like Rousseau, these French thinkers, and you also have to. Yeah, there's more to the story than that, but you really need to go back to, if not the 18th century, the 17th century. So you can go back to Machiavelli, and in fact, you can go back to Italy in the 15th century. There's a guy called Marsilio of Padua. So they wanted to remove Christian ideas so that they could build their utopian state. And this is what they want to do today. So this goes back. It's not to do with the Catholic. I know everyone hates the Catholic Church. And look, I'm a Protestant, okay? Anglican Church. Priests in the Anglican Church, bishops in the Anglican Church, okay? And I'll be honest, the Protestant Church lies about Catholicism whole day, every day, nonstop. As much as Abduls lie about Christianity, Protestants lie about Catholicism. I'll say that bluntly. If you don't like me, unsubscribe. So yeah, and unfortunately, there's always this, I often find there's this idea they want to smear the Catholic Church as the fault of the Catholics. And yeah, if you want to start looking at Protestant history, you're not going to find a lot that's much prettier either. Let's just be honest about that. It's not very pretty either. You guys you see, the Catholic Church is one big bullseye everyone can hit. There's about 9 billion Protestant denominations. It's very hard to pin them down. I'll leave my rant at that, but understand. But if you start scratching under the surface, it's not very pretty either. Yeah, thanks.
And just to be clear, Lloyd asked you to unsubscribe from his channel, not mine.
Yeah, no. Look, I know if you don't like what I have to say, but notice the Freemasons and Jesuits may have supplanted true Christianity. See there, notice there is always a Protestant effort to smear the Catholic Church. Now, I'll say Protestants will lie whole day, every day about Catholicism, about the Catholic Church. Lie, and I mean lie as badly as Abduls. It's propaganda. It's as bad as the atheists. It's as bad as the Abduls. I am not a Catholic. I am a Protestant, and honestly, I am shocked by what I find when I look. If you don't like it, too bad. Sorry.
Yeah, I do find that while there is sometimes hostility from Catholics against Protestants, the majority of the hostility goes the other way around. And I do say that as a Protestant as well. And I think that's really unfortunate, because I think that Catholics and Protestants, we are ultimately both Christians. We both believe in the saving grace of Christ on the cross. We put our faith in God to provide for us. We don't put our faith in our works. So I think it's really unfortunate that there's hostility on either side. But objectively speaking, Protestants are the majority of the hostility.
Yeah, a lot of that comes from Luther, sadly. He wrote a huge amount of it, or endorsed it, or encouraged it.
We have a follow-up from Gospel Truth. I appreciate your point, but Lloyd's resources suggest Freemasons and Jesuits may have supplanted true Christianity and provided low-hanging fruit for atheist attacks. Any comment from you, Lloyd?
I mean, I've said it. It's like, this is just another, hey, I'm a Protestant. I'm going to smear the Catholic Church. I'm going to repeat propaganda. I'm going to lie. I'm going to stab the church in its back because, hey, that's the Catholic Church is evil, right? So the atheists go, Islam and atheism go, the church on average, the Christians in general are evil, and the Protestants are, well, the Catholics are evil, let's kill them. So yeah, it's just basically you're doing the job of the Catholics. You're doing the job of the atheists and the Muslims. So sola scriptura. No, they're not all lies, but then again, seriously, if you wanna go into the history, it's not very pretty on the Protestant side either.
My channel is intentionally non-denominational and ecumenical. I don't have any desire to attack any branch of Christianity. Like I said, I believe that ultimately we're all Christians. We all have the same fundamental beliefs. I think there are problems in the Catholic Church. I think there are significant problems in the Catholic Church, but I think there are significant problems in all churches, because churches ultimately are made up of human beings. Human beings are fallible. Human beings make mistakes. If I found a perfect church, I would not be worthy of being in that church. Let's put it that way. So, my
Anyway.
desire is to not talk about these internal debates, because that's not my purpose. I'm not saying people shouldn't talk about them. I'm just saying there is a time and place to talk about them, and it's not on my channel.
Yeah, I'm surprised. So I'll take that to heart. I guess there's a message there. But just as I can speak about Islam, anybody can take the time to read the history of Christianity, and you can read the histories of the propaganda and the lies. I mean, it's freely available if you're willing to look. And
Definitely. So there was one question that came up while we got off topic here. Oh, yes. It would be good if we have some tables or charts of information about the numbers of murders committed by communist regimes around the world. I just say, stay tuned.
No, I mentioned, yeah. So have a look at the guy
Or
called
you can bring
Rommel.
up the chart now if you want, but there is a
Okay.
chart exactly on that in the next portion of the presentation.
Yeah, but if you want a book, go to my archive, go to any of my videos. You'll see the link to my Google archive. Go to a guy called Rommel, and it's called Death by Government. That is probably the single most detailed on that. I'm not sure how old it is right now, so some of the numbers may have been updated since then. But Death by Government is probably your best source by Rommel, Rummel. Look that up. And the numbers are off the charts. I mean, we don't know exactly. The problem is it could be as many as 370 million. Right? But we can acknowledge at least 110 million. So the numbers can easily be more than 3 times that.
Close out on this comment, although it's a joke. Oxford English Dictionary entry on atheism. Christianity with poor architecture. Of course, the dictionary doesn't say that, but it should, because that's ultimately what atheism is in practice. Yeah. That it takes the social structure that was put in place by Christianity, removes God, keeps the rest, and says, we're the enlightened ones. Yeah. Any closing thoughts from you, Lloyd?
Christianity is based on truth and reason. We derive our view of the world from the logos, which is the principle of reason. So this is not an atheist position. Theirs is the will. They claim the word reason. It doesn't mean what they think it means, and they don't use it the way we use it. We are the reasonable ones. Now, we have made mistakes as Christians, I would say, historically. We own up to that. Right? No human enterprise is perfect. However, Christianity brought the world the greatest civilization known to man, the most successful, prosperous, and peaceful. And we cannot allow this literally paganism to rise up as it is, because stripping away these moral values is bringing back paganism. It is bringing back war. And it is all lies, and you have to arm yourself with facts. I get upset because I've actually read and studied a lot of these facts. And, and propaganda is not facts. Take the time. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. I've had a very busy week stream-wise. I was live for 7 hours on Wednesday, 12 hours yesterday, another 2+ hours just now, and I have a Bible study this night as well. So we're going to sign off now. But thank you for joining.
I would have shut up.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a great week and pursue truth wherever that leads you. God bless.
Thank you.